The boss room was exceptionally crowded. That said, aside from the armored golems forming pristine rows on either side of a stone pathway, the only people in the room were me, the dungeon master, Rokuko, the dungeon core, and my slaves, Meat and Ichika. Rokuko was wearing a white dress that showed off her slender body perfectly. It was modeled after Haku's dress, so Rokuko liked it quite a lot. Meat and Ichika were both wearing maid uniforms, but not their normal ones. I had given them new ones for this occasion. In other words, we were all in full dress. Of course, I was no exception. I had on a glittering set of full, silver plate armor with a red cape. The golden designs made from a crushed gold coin were a key feature. Though, truthfully, it was steel armor with a surface covering of silver. And just to be fully honest here, it was so heavy I couldn't move in it on my own. The whole set was actually one big golem, so I could technically move, but a single slip-up would lead to me getting hurt pretty bad. I was going for the image of a king giving his people an audience. Me being the king, of course. And I mean, I was the dungeon master of this dungeon, which basically made me a king of sorts. I placed the 3 newcomers right outside of the door. With that, the preparations were complete. I had told them beforehand that I'd be holding a naming ceremony for them, but I hadn't said a word about it being this extravagant. Hee hee. I can't wait to see the look on their faces. Enter! I called out, and a golem opened the boss door. That is, the 2 large steel double doors with eagle decorations carved into them. The 3 girls who had been waiting behind the door looked towards me. A look of shock washed over them for a brief moment, but it quickly faded and they entered the room with serious expressions. Oh? I'm impressed. They know how to carry themselves. Stop there and kneel before me. The vampire in the center kneeled as ordered. In turn, the Silky on her left and the apprentice which on her right kneeled as well. The vampire had silver hair and crimson eyes like glittering rubies. The freckled apprentice which wore a robe and wizard hat, with a simple staff. The Silky was basically just a light green maid. Those 3 individuals were my dungeon's new recruits. The naming ceremony shall thus begin. I tensed my stomach to speak as powerfully and regally as possible. This is getting pretty fun. By the way, naming ceremonies weren't actually a thing, so I had no template to follow. I was just winging it. Listen well, for I will now impart thy names upon thee. I stood up slowly, using the golem's assistance, and drew the sword on my hip. Vampire. Raise thine head. As you wish. The vampire raised her head as ordered. All right, let's see here. Her new name should be. To thee I grace the name of Ray. Understood. My gratitude is boundless. Man, I sound like a medieval asshole. Ha. Well, whatever. Too late to back out of this act now. I based her name on the fact that, due to customizing her spawn a little, she had an attack power of 0. Since Rei means 0, in Japanese, it's really easy to remember. She looks really happy about that name. Now I feel kinda bad for just lazily thinking it up on the spot. Sorry. Anyway. Next up. Silky. Raise thine head. Understood. This girl looked a lot more calm and gentle than the vampire. Rather than Ray. I guess the word graceful would fit her better than anything else. She kinda gave off some older sister vibes. Maybe some married woman vibes. Basically, she felt a little mature. To thee I grace the name of Kinyu. I will gratefully accept this name. Silky. Silk. Kinu means silk in Japanese. Thus, Kinyu. I thought about just calling her Kinu, but Kinyu sounded more like a real name in this world, so I rolled with that instead. Huh! What am I gonna name the next Silky? I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. Next up was the last one. Apprentice Witch. Raise thine head. Okay. Yeah. Yep. This girl's a lot more calm than Kinyu. Really, she's just totally laid back. She's definitely the kind of girl that doesn't give any fucks about anything. To thee I grace the name of Naruna. Thank you so much, Teacher Master. Her name came from her being a witch, obviously. Huh. What does Naruna have to do with witches? I mean, witches are always stirring stuff in pots, right? Well, the word for stir in Japanese is naru. Witches stir stuff so much they basically do it all day, am I right? Yeah. I'm right. Also, I haven't agreed to be her teacher yet. Come on. I pretty much gave them all half-assed names, but since they all came from a language that didn't exist in this world, I should be safe. Though they might actually be happy to know their names come from a different world, like Rokuko was. Thus ends the naming ceremony. Alright, all I gotta do now is wrap this up by giving them their first orders. I went out of my way to set up a naming ceremony this elaborate all to tell them that there's a job I wanted them to dedicate their lives to. A duty so meaningful that they were utterly indispensable. A duty so vital that they would need to give it their absolute all day in and day out. Now then, I shall impart upon thee three my orders. Understood? Lay upon us whatever order you may wish, master. I let out a dramatic cough to set the tone. And then, when all eyes were on me, I spoke. Hereafter thou all shall assist this dungeon. By becoming employees of the inn I built near it. Understood? As you wish? Ray's stunned voice echoed through the room. Day 100 the seasons moved on and it became summer. I was lazing around in my fairly nice room within the Dancing Doll Inn. An inn I built myself, I might add. Even though I had finally drilled a tunnel clean through Tsaya Mountain and found a way to get free money by charging people for going through it. That just backfired by making my inn so much busier that the passage fee wasn't even worth it. I even ended up going out of my way to make a recreation room after enough visitors complained about there being nothing to do around here except visit the onsen. It was more of a recreation building, really, soundproofed and built a short distance away from the main inn. A lot of people spent basically all day in there. To sum the place up, it was a room where adventurers could play with the dice and cards found in the dungeon. Dice already existed in the world before now, but the playing cards were unique to our dungeon. Now more people were passing by the area. More people nearby, more people using the inn. Ichika's prediction had been right on the money. Fuck. Regarding the dungeon I'm actually supposed to be here for, I made it such that very rarely one of the golems wandering the labyrinthine first and second basement floors will have a knife. That knife being, of course, a golem blade, a special magic blade knife that vibrates and sharpens when you pour mana into it. Any adventurer that successfully takes down the golem gets their magic blade knife. There's only 5 of them walking around right now, though. As for the dungeon, the first area is suitable for beginners, as it only has goblins. After going a little deeper, one would be met with clay golems, and in the lower section I added a iron golem spawner, which spawns iron golems, and they can be sold as materials. They are pretty lucrative, so a lot of C-rank parties are raiding my dungeon now for iron golems. I also recycled the trap used in dungeon battle with Haku, so it seems the lower area is a little hard to pass. I was getting money and DP from both those staying in the inn and those passing through the tunnel. Thanks to that, things were a lot more stable for me. Especially since I could turn the money into DP if need be. Which is why I had the spare time to laze around in my room. Alright, time to do nothing but sleep all day. I prepared to get in bed and start snoozing, but at the last moment, the guild receptionist came to the inn. Apparently, she had something big to talk about. And so, I ended up in the conference room, talking to the receptionist while Rokuko sat beside me with a frozen smile on her face. What? Smithery? Yes. The blacksmiths wish to open a smithery here. It will be built some distance away from the inn and the guild due to the noise, but they do plan to build a branch office nearby just as the guild did. I assumed it would be best to tell you about this beforehand. Man, this sure is coming out of nowhere. Earlier today, a party of adventurers returned from the dungeon with the corpse of an iron golem. I am sure you know of this already, but it has been confirmed that iron golems are residing within the dungeon. Apparently, a dungeon with iron golems was treated as a gold mine. Or in this case, an iron mine. They were actually known as golem mines or quasi-mines to those in the business. Makes sense. Sources of ore are pretty valuable. And since the entirety of an iron golem's body is ore, no actual mining has to be done. A blacksmith can use the stuff right then and there. Of course, they'd want to just go ahead and make a smithery here. Though apparently they were planning on making one here anyway to repair the adventurers' equipment, and so on. Nobody told me anything about that. Oh, wait. That's what she's doing right now. Does all this mean that this place is gonna be put on maps now? Maps? It's already been on maps. It was added the moment we started building the branch office here. Wait, I thought dungeons weren't put on maps? Dungeons not managed by the guild are not placed on maps in order to prevent unready adventurers from visiting them on their own. There is no need or point to hiding a dungeon that has a guild branch office right next to its entrance. In fact, we are steadily advertising it to draw more people here. Oh. Crap. I might have made a huge mistake here. Soldiers of God will definitely come here if we're on a map. Ah, wait. Soldiers of Gods are heroes here and are automatic S ranks in the guild. They can see information on whatever dungeon they want, whether it's on the maps or not. Though this is still definitely gonna bring us more attention. There is one thing I would like to ask you about. Huh? What's that? When did you construct that recreation room? One day it wasn't there and the next it was, out of nowhere. A magician friend of Haku's popped it into existence for me. Ah, a friend of an A-rank adventurer. I see, that makes perfect sense. The receptionist and I nodded together. I was a friend of Haku's, so I wasn't lying to her. I just wasn't telling her the whole truth. The guild had lie-detecting magical tools, so I tried to refrain from lying to them at all times if possible. It was pretty annoying, to say the least. I was hoping she'd leave pretty soon after that, but we ended up discussing things for another hour. Having to stay on guard that whole time was exhausting. Day 129. I had decked myself out in equipment, and went into the dungeon with meat to signal that I was indeed an adventurer doing adventurer things. But upon leaving, Goza grabbed me and dragged us to the guild for whatever reason. Two bearded, middle-aged dwarves were giving each other a bear hug in the guild's branch office. Goza was the C-rank adventurer that had taken down the iron golem and retrieved its corpse. And apparently Kantaro was the new blacksmith that'd be working here. A dungeon with magic blades and iron golems was perfect for a nearby smithery, so Goza called over a blacksmith friend of his after coming here. Alrighty, Kaima. This is Kantara. Treat him right, why here? Ah, right. Nice to meet you. So, why'd you bring me here? So, I'm gonna be building a smithery near here. I dunno when it'll be done, but if you ever need your weapons repaired, you know where to go. My dream is to make my own magic blade one day. Kantara stares at Meat for some time, and after a bit. Little lady, this sword, can you let me see it? Meat gives him her sword, and after analyzing it he asks, is this a magic sword? Well, I will do a maintenance for you as a meeting gift. A free gift, that sounds a good deal. If it's free, do mine too, that don't have any sign of use. He knows just by looking, a terrifying blacksmith. You all can check out another terrifying blacksmith video on this channel if you want. He took out a whetstone and started sharpening the knife. After a bit, he swung it around, looked at the blade from various angles, and then started sharpening it again. He repeated that several times. After several minutes, Kantara took a good look at the knife and then nodded in satisfaction. Looks like you're getting a lot of use out of this one. I can tell you've repaired it before. Good work. I like a warrior that takes care of their weapons. Kantara gave Meat a toothy smile. Right, it should be plenty sharp now. Just gotta top it off with a good ol' revitalize, and there. All done. Huh! Did you just use the survival magic spell Revitalize? Not the earth magic spell Sharpen? According to Ichika, Revitalize was a spell that energized the ground's natural state and somewhat helped improve crop growth. Sharpen, on the other hand, was a low-to-earth magic spell that increased a blade's sharpness. As far as I could tell, finishing a blade off would best be done with Sharpen, not Revitalize. You bet. Revitalize energizes the ground. So why wouldn't it energize swords too? They're all made of stuff from the ground, you know. I hadn't even thought of that. Ores were indeed located within the ground, which made it part of the earth. I didn't expect this guy to beat me when it comes to magic. He's good. Your revitalize is basically just a good luck charm, though. I ain't ever seen another blacksmith use it before. Hey, fuck you too, Goza. My family's been using the spell for generations. And you know from experience my swords are sharper and last longer than any other blacksmith's, don't ya? Ha! That's 'cause you're a great blacksmith. The spell's barely changing anything. Really though, what would energizing a sword even do? Not like it's gonna grow legs and run to the enemies or nothing. Good grief. Swords are alive, you know? You're a dwarf too, Goza. You gotta learn to show us more respect for weapons. Speaking of which, the effects of spells could be changed by how you visualize them. Which meant that if you visualized revitalize as actually energizing a sword, that might end up happening in an abstract sort of way. It might even work like restoration magic for golems. I'll have to experiment some more with this later. Oof, we really got off subject there, eh? My bad. Point being, come to my place if you ever need a blacksmith. I'll mainly be dealing with weapons adventurers bring me, but I can make all sorts of practical things like nails and cutlery, too. Oh, right. Video games give most people the impression that blacksmiths did nothing but work with weapons and armor, but they actually spent a lot of time making common everyday things as well. Alright. I'll ring you up if I ever need something important. Leave it all to me. Though, I'm gonna need a forge and whatnot before I can do anything. I'm gonna be making a simple one for myself, but it's still gonna take like a week or two. Come back then. Huh. That's a long time. What do you make forges out of? Eh? Bricks infused with some kind of material resistant to fire. I got a lot of red lizard scales for cheap a while back. I was thinking of using them. Oh, that's very fantasy. But yeah, makes sense that you'd make a forge out of fire-resistant bricks. And, speaking of which, I have a lot of phoenix eggshells left over. I bet those would be good for his forge. They resist a dragon's fire, after all. I stealthily withdrew a single egg's worth of shells and handed them over to Kantara. Here, consider this an upfront payment. If you want some fire-resistant stuff, these should be perfect for you. Eggshells? Let's see here. Yep, they're fire-resistant. Shells from fire-resistant monsters are pretty good materials. These'll be great for my forge. I'll gladly take 'em. Sure. Just do a good job when the time comes. And if you ever figure out how to make magic blades, give me one. Hey now, Kaima, you really think some broken eggshells are worth a magic blade? Day 132. For some reason, after the blacksmith arrived, everyone around me was suddenly all about expansion. The guild was even talking about building a tavern beside their branch office. Why? Why is this happening? But there was no use crying over spilled milk. And people gathering around the dungeon wasn't all bad. We got more DP from them, after all. But I think we're getting a little too big. Nowadays, there's always at least one adventurer rooming in our inn. Master, we need you to replenish our food stores. Meat, who managed distribution of food in the kitchen, came walking into my room. Summoning a bunch of food was a real pain, but we had to provide meals for our visitors. I bought the meals, fruits, and vegetables we were lacking and handed them over to Meat, who then stashed it all away into her storage, an alternate dimension where time didn't pass. Rokuko could summon the same food I could, but for some reason, the food I summoned tasted better. It probably had to do with how much we knew about the food itself. Suddenly, Meat dropped some of the food I handed over to her. Luckily, it was just a bread roll wrapped in plastic, so it touching the ground wasn't really a problem. You're not looking so good. Are you alright? I put my hand on her forehead. It was so sweaty my hand stuck to it, and hot enough that she obviously had a fever. That made me finally notice that Meat looked a little pale and sick. It was hard to notice since her dark skin was akin to a deep tan. I'd have noticed sooner if she had much whiter skin like Rokuko. Ma. I'm fine, I think. Meat, as a dog beeskin, had a significantly sturdier body than your average human. But she was still a kid who probably wasn't even 10 years old yet. Get in bed and rest. That's an order. Kaya! Ah, you understood. I laid the sick meat into my futon and left my room to take her place in the kitchen. Crap, I ended up working. I groaned to myself in sorrow as I wiped Nika's forehead with a wet towel. She had fallen asleep in my futon. Nika's fever probably arose from exhaustion made worse by the heat. Basically, overworking in the summer. She needed some good rest. Rokuko came in my room with some water for Meat, while I was sitting all tired out because of all the work I had to do in the inn. Are you okay? Did you two take a rest? I saw that the water she is carrying is lukewarm. Wait a minute, it's lukewarm water. But daily magic can't make cold water, right? She was right. With daily magic you can make water, but you can't change temperature of that water. Just use ice magic maybe? So I used my cheat skill, auto-translator, change the chant of water spell from water become a ball to cold water become a small ball. Water. Seeing the cold water, Rokuko was really shocked. Translation cheat is useful for these things. Perhaps Meat is weak due to fatigue, she must rest for now, and then I thought. We have insufficient manpower. So that's how I started to increase the number of my employees.